Okay, so well, today we're gonna practice what we did yesterday, and we're gonna be practicing task 4 of the speaking section. Yes. Okay. Now, this task we said you only have to listen to a lecture for this one. And well, basically they ask you to summarize what the lecture said and what the lecture was about using the examples that they give you. Remember that in this case, you always have 2 subtopics and 2 examples, and you need to focus on them. Do you have any questions before we start practicing? Okay, so let's start by doing this one here. I'm gonna play the lecture. Please take notes, and then we'll try.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class. The professor is discussing advertising strategies.
In advertising, various strategies are used to persuade people to buy products. In order to sell more products, advertisers will often try to make us believe that a product will meet our needs or desires perfectly, even if it's not true. The strategies they use can be subtle, friendly forms of persuasion that are sometimes hard to recognize. In a lot of ads, repetition is a key strategy. Research shows that repeated exposure to a message, even something meaningless or untrue, is enough to make people accept it or see it in a positive light. You've all seen the car commercials on TV, like the one that refers to its roomy cars over and over again. You know which one I mean. This guy is driving around and he keeps stopping to pick up different people. He picks up 3 or 4 people, and each time the narrator says, "Plenty of room for friends, plenty of room for family, plenty of room for everybody." The same message is repeated several times in the course of the commercial. Now the car actually looks kind of small. It's not a very big car at all, but you get the sense that it's pretty spacious. You'd think that the viewer would reach the logical conclusion that the slogan misrepresents the product. Instead, what usually happens is that when the statement "plenty of room" is repeated often enough, people are actually convinced it's true. Another strategy they use is to get a celebrity to advertise a product. It turns out that we're more likely to accept an advertising claim made by somebody famous, a person we admire and find appealing. We tend to think they're trustworthy. So you might have a car commercial that features a well-known race car driver. Now, it may not be a very fast car. It could even be an inexpensive vehicle with a low performance rating. But if a popular race car driver is shown driving it and saying, "I like my cars fast," then people will believe the car is impressive for its speed.
Okay, the question says, using the examples from the talk, explain how persuasive strategies are used in advertising. Timer, because now you will have 20 seconds to prepare your response. Okay, so please, if you can start speaking, let's go now.
Okay, the lecture discusses the persuasive strategies that are used for advertising. First, the professor explains how they can pretend something, which is, in this case, for example, a car. And the brand pretends that it want to pretend that the car is bigger. So in the commercial, there are many people going inside the car. That's the way they show it's bigger than it is. Then she explains how sometimes celebrities are used for these kinds of persuasive strategies. To illustrate this, she explains how some...
Okay, don't forget to look at the clock, right? Ideas, before going into the example, you should have. Okay, so it was good though. The second, I think it was better than the first. You explained how celebrities are used to persuade customers in commercials. Now, as for the first one, are you sure that was the top topic?
No, I didn't get the subtopic. The first one, I just get the example, but I didn't the topic.
Okay, so it was actually repetition. So repeating something too many times so that the consumers will believe it. So that's why the person in the commercial was repeating plenty of room for friends, for family. So repeating that idea so much is going to make the customer believe that it's actually a big car, even if it isn't actually a big car.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so that'd be the only thing. But I mean, aside from that, which is mainly content, you need to try to work on organizing your time a bit better, right? You're spending too much time in the first parts, in the intro, in the topics, and then you don't have enough with the second. So summarize more. Sometimes you don't need to explain what the subtopics are. For example, in this case, if you say having a celebrity advertise a product, that's enough. Go directly to the example because your example is going to explain it for you. Okay, so don't explain too much.
Okay, thank you.
Have any questions?
No, I think no, I don't.
Okay. So let's do another one. It's a bit different, but let's.
Listen to part of a talk in an art appreciation class.
In order for art to communicate, to appeal to the emotions or the intellect, it has to combine various visual elements to express meaning or emotion. It's really the visual components of the work, things like color, texture, shape, lines, and how these elements work together that tell us something about the work. Artists combine and manipulate these visual elements to express a message or to create a mood. Think about how a painter might use color, for example. You all know from experience that different colors appeal in different ways to the senses and can convey different meanings. An artist chooses certain colors to evoke a particular mood and make powerful statements. The color red, for example, is a strong color and can conjure up strong emotions, such as extreme joy or excitement or even anger. Blue, on the other hand, is considered a cool color. Blue colors tend to have a calming effect on viewers. Another visual element important to art is texture. By texture, I mean the surface quality or feel of the work, its smoothness or roughness or softness. Now, of course, in some types of art, the texture is physical. It can actually be touched by the fingers. But in painting, for example, texture can be visual. The way an artist paints certain areas of a painting can create the illusion of texture, an object's smoothness or roughness or softness. A rough texture can evoke stronger emotions and strength, while a smooth texture is more calming and less emotional. As I said earlier, Artists often combine elements to convey a message about the work. Take a painting that, say, uses a lot of strong colors like reds and oranges and uses brush strokes that are broad, wide sweeping brush strokes that suggest a rough texture. Well, these elements together can convey a wilder, more chaotic emotion in the viewer more than in, say, a painting with tiny, smooth brush strokes and soft or pale colors. Artists use these visual effects and the senses they arouse to give meaning to their work.
Now, using points and examples from the lecture, explain the importance of visual elements in painting. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, so do you want to go, Emilia? Could you try, Gamaliel?
Yep. The lecture discuss visual elements in painting, using points as an example for this topic. For example, the artists use different colors for bringing a sense of emotions. Like red, it's a strong color. The artists use red for emotions like angry, and use the texture is the superfluous. Is maybe the part of paint or picture is physical and touchable. Use different effects for textures, illusion from the things. For example, a forest, rock, field. I don't know. Less texture, it's less emotional.
All right. Remember, you only have 60 seconds, right? So whatever you say after the 60 seconds are over won't be considered in your response. Be careful there. You cannot go past the time that you have. Now, as for your response, I don't think it was bad. I mean, I like the fact that you were able to understand both subtopics, so color and texture, and both examples. So you mentioned the color red as an example, which was given by the professor, and you mentioned visual texture, right? I think soft and rough textures. So that's good. That's a great start. Now, what I'd say, first thing, try to use a template. When you start in your introduction, you say the lecture discusses, right? Don't forget to conjugate the verb because it's singular. So the lecture discusses, and don't use anything that you have before the word explain. What you have to say after the word discusses is what you have after the word explaining the question. So you'd be saying, the lecture discusses the importance of visual elements in painting. And that is your introduction, right? Lecture discusses, and then you copy whatever is after the word explain. And then don't forget to use a template. So make sure that you separate the two subtopics a little bit more. I didn't see where you stopped talking about color and you started talking about texture. You need to separate those two a little bit more. So use those transitions. First, the professor talks about color. Color can be used to express emotion. For example, the color red expresses a strong emotions such as anger. On the other hand, the color blue is, expresses a calm emotion. When you stop with the first topic, you need a transition. So tell me, I don't know what the other one was. I think it's furthermore. The professor also mentions texture as another visual element. Texture can be implied or it can be visual, I don't know. All right, so make them separate them a little bit more using those transitions. And careful with the grammar. One thing that I'm only gonna ask you to focus on one thing is from now, which is gonna be conjugating your verbs. Remember that in English, you can never have the verb only. In Spanish, we can only have the verb, right? We say, I don't know, like, uso la textura, right? So I can say this in Spanish. I can say, uso la textura, and I know that I'm talking about me, right? Yo uso la textura. But in English, you can never use that. You can never say that without the subject. So in English, you have to mention the subject. You have to say, I use texture, right? So you always need the subject. Same thing when you talk about the artist. Artists need texture to express this and that. So careful with that and try to always pay more attention when you're conjugating, when you're mentioning the verbs. So the artist uses, right, instead of use. The artist uses texture. The artist expresses. The lecturer discusses. So careful with those conjugations, okay? Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions? Okay, guys, so let's do another one.
Why do we do the things we do? What drives us to participate in certain activities, to buy a certain car, or even to choose a certain career? In other words, what motivates us to do what we do? Well, in studies of motivation, psychologists distinguish between two very different types. Our reasons for doing something, our motivations, can be extrinsic. In other words, based on some kind of external reward, like praise or money. Or they can be intrinsic, meaning we engage in the activity because it pleases us internally. Both create strong forces that lead us to behave in certain ways. However, intrinsic motivation is generally considered to be more long-lasting than the other. As I said, extrinsic motivation is external. It's the desire to behave in a certain way in order to obtain some kind of external reward. A child, for example, who regularly does small jobs around the house, does them not because she enjoys taking out the garbage or doing the dishes, but because she knows if she does these things, she'll be given a small amount of money for doing them. But how motivated would the child be to continue doing the work if her parents suddenly stopped giving her money for it? With intrinsic or internal motivation, we want to do something because we enjoy it or get a sense of accomplishment from it. Most people who are internally motivated get pleasure from the activity, so they just feel good about doing it. For example, I go to the gym several times a week. I don't go because I'm training for a marathon or anything. I just enjoy it. I have more energy after I exercise, and I know it's good for my health, so it makes me feel good about myself. And that's what's kept me going there for the past 5 years.
Okay. The question says, using points and examples from the talk, explain the two types of motivation. Now you will have 20 seconds to prepare your response. Okay, so please, Carolina, you can go now.
The lecture discusses two types of motivation. First, the professor explains in extrinsic, which is the motivation we get for external reward. For instance, she explains the situation of the child that has to put the garbage in the trash. This means that the child does because he will have a reward later. Then she goes on to explain the intrinsic. That is to get that the person that is doing something has a pleasure on doing it. It means that lasts more. To illustrate this, she gives the example of when she goes to the gym, she feels healthy, so she will continue doing it.
Okay, great. That was great. That was awesome. So now you manage your time a lot better. It was exactly 25 seconds for both the topics, 10 for your introduction. You summarized the two subtopics more, so your definition was right on point, intrinsic motivation and extrinsic, and the examples were also well explained. So I don't think I have any comments. I think I was gonna say something. Careful when you're, for example, talking about the first example she gives about this child. Remember that it's not a specific child we're talking about, right? It's not one specific child. So instead of saying the child, just tell me, she gives the example of a child, right? Or children. So a child does this or this or that because they want to get a reward. Only that, but it was great. It was really good, Karina. Well done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's try to do something different here. So this is gonna be biology now, to try something else.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
We all know that insects like to eat plants, but some plants have been able to develop ways to protect themselves from insects. Today I'm going to talk about some ways plants defend themselves. Now, some plants have physical features that prevent insects from landing on them, like the passion plant, for example. Its leaves have little spiky hairs all over them. They're like spikes sticking out of the plant that are so numerous and dense that they prevent insects from landing on the leaves. Basically, there's just no room for the insect to land. And since insects can't land on the leaves, they can't eat them. So the little hairs serve as a physical feature that helps protect the passion plant from insects. All right, but other plants protect themselves using chemical defenses, like the potato plant. The potato plant's able to release a chemical throughout its leaf system whenever an insect attacks it, starts eating the leaf. So, say an insect starts eating a potato plant's leaf. That will cause the plant to react by releasing a chemical throughout its leaf system. The insect swallows this chemical as it eats, and this chemical discourages the insect from wanting to eat any more of the plant. How? Well, the substance makes the insect feel full, like it's already had enough to eat. The insect no longer feels hungry, so it stops eating the plant. So, by emitting this chemical, the potato plant protects itself from insects.
Okay, the question says, using points from the lecture, explain how the passion plant and the potato plant defend themselves from insects. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your response. Okay, so please, Gamaliel, you can try, you can go now. Okay, Gamaliel.
The lecture discuss why how the plants how the passion plant and the potato plant defend themselves from insect. Some plants uses chemicals for protect themselves for the insects. For example, the passion plant and the potato plant. For example, the potato plant have chemicals which intoxicate the insect. That chemical produce that the insect stop eat the plant.
Okay, good. So don't forget to pay attention to your verbs, right? The chemical produces that the insect stops. Forget to conjugate it. If you're talking about a plural thing, so some plants use, right, instead of uses. Careful with that grammar. What you can do, you know what I usually did with students who are struggling in like conjugating verbs in the simple present is I would play some YouTube videos. So first I'd play like, I don't know, if you go online and you search for daily routines as a university student, for example, because that's going to help you with vocabulary too. So you will see somebody that's doing all of their stuff and like they're waking up, they're getting ready for school or getting ready for work, they're walking to work or they're starting their cars. So you stop every time and you try to narrate what that person is doing. So that way you're going to practice using the third person conjugation. So you're going to be like, she wakes up at 8 a.m. She turns her alarm off at this time. She brushes her teeth. She gets up. She gets out of bed. She makes her bed. So try to do that so that you can practice conjugating the verbs. And then you can do the same, but do it in first person, right? Talking about you. Or then you can watch videos where you have more people. So people as a group doing different things. So they do this, they do that. And that way you're going to practice conjugating the verbs. Okay? That's going to be so that you improve the grammar. Now, as for the content, specifically about this lecture, remember that you always have 2 subtopics and 2 examples. Right now, you only talked about 1 subtopic, right? You said chemical defenses. Great, that is the second subtopic. But remember that you will have 2. So when you're listening, pay attention and try to hear 2 different ways in which plants defend themselves from insects. One of them was by using their body features, and you have the example of the passion plant there. And the other one was the one that you mentioned, right? Using chemical defenses, and that was the potato plant that did that. So careful with that. Remember, you always have 2 subtopics and 2 examples. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions? Okay. So, all right, let's take a look at this one here. It says economics almost.
Listen to part of a lecture in an economics class.
So when we talk about the demand for a product, we're referring to how much consumers want to buy it, right? And often the demand for a product is influenced by its price. The more expensive it becomes, the less chance that people will want to buy it. Okay, but that's not the whole story. Sometimes the demand for a product can also be influenced by the price of other related products. First, there are those products called substitute goods. If products can be substituted for one another, then, well, then they're called substitute goods. They're similar enough to be interchangeable. And an increase in the price of one means an increase in the demand for the other, like butter and margarine. They're pretty much used for the same purposes. Margarine's a butter substitute, and you can bake equally well with either. Well, when the price of butter goes up, it becomes less affordable, and so what do people do? They buy margarine instead, right? So, you see, an increase in the price of butter increases the demand for margarine. Now, another instance where the price of one product can influence the demand of another is when you have two products that can't be used without each other. Those products we call complement goods. They complement or complete each other, if you will, like compact discs and compact disc players. You need both products in order to use either. So if the price of either product increases, demand for both is likely to decrease. And if the price of CDs goes up, well, demand for them will go down, right? And because CDs and CD players complement each other, what'll also happen is that the demand for CD players will go down too.
Okay, the question says, using the points and examples from the talk, explain how substitute goods and complement goods influence demand for a particular product. We'll now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So, Karina, please, you can start speaking now.
The lecture discusses how substitute goods and complement goods influences demand for a particular product. First, the professor explains substitute goods, which means that one product can be replaced by another product. For instance, the butter and the margarine. If the butter is expensive, we can buy the margarine, the price is lower. That's how it works. So if the demand will change depending the substitute product. Then she goes on to explain the complement goods. This means that two products can be, you need one product for another product. To illustrate this, she gives the example of I don't remember she gives the example of how both products can increase. If one product increases, the other one will increase.
Okay, exactly. Yes. If the demand, if the price of one product increases, then the demand of both decreases, right? I think that's it. Because the ideas here were how the price of one product can influence the demand of the other, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but great. The first one was great. You only needed a little bit more time for the second one. Did you forget the second example?
Yeah, I thought it was an example as the butter, but I think the example was just the demand and the price, how it works with complement goods. But it was a little difficult. I don't know too much about economics and administration, so to understand was a little confusing. I get it, but to explain it in English too is a little confusing.
Yeah, I get that. So yes, they do give an example. I think they talked about CD and CD players, which are complement goods. So if CDs are more expensive, the people are going to start buying both of them, right? Because they cannot use the CD player with the CDs. So.
Yeah, true. City and city player. Yeah.
The only thing you were missing. Honestly, I love how your responses are going. I like the way that you summarize the first, and I like the way that, like, for example, you just mentioned what substitute goods are, goods that can be replaced with one another, and then you went directly to the example, and you use the example to explain a little bit more how they work. So, no comments, always look at the clock at the end of your response. You didn't have time to give the example, so you should have stopped there, right? Always look at the time. That'd be the only thing.
Okay.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions? Right. Okay. So let's do. Okay, let's do something entirely different.
Listen to a part of a lecture from a history class. The professor is talking about the Industrial Revolution.
Back in the 18th century, in a time known as the Industrial Revolution, some countries, well, England in particular, started using new technology, like steam-powered machines, to produce goods. And the use of these machines brought about some significant changes. Let's go over two main changes that occurred. One change was that the center of production moved from homes to factories. Let's take fabric or cloth as an example. Historically, for a very long time, people had made cloth by hand in their homes, earning a little money from their home-based cloth production. But then these new steam-powered machines for weaving cloth were invented and placed in factories, and these machines could weave cloth much more quickly and efficiently. So there wasn't any reason to keep making cloth slowly in homes when it could be made faster on factory machines. Thus, the majority of cloth production shifted from home-based businesses to factory production. Another result of the new technology is that cities started forming around factories. Like, let's say there was a cloth factory that was built in a certain small village. Now, of course, the factory needed workers to operate the machines used in cloth production. So the factory would hire a lot of rural workers who would then move from the countryside to the village. So instead of being spread out all over the countryside, the workers started to congregate in the village with the factory. As a result, the village got bigger and eventually grew into a city.
Okay, the question says, using points and examples from the talk, describe two changes that occurred after machines began to be used for manufacturing goods. Two changes that occurred after machines began to be used for manufacturing goods. We'll now have 20 seconds to prepare your response. Okay, so please, Gamaliel. You may start your response now.
The lecture discussed two changes that occurred that machines began to be used for manufacturing goods. To change, for example, in the past, many people was worked in the worked for produce goods. One change was use of machines for manufacturing goods more fast goods faster than people. Another change was the size of factories was growth with the time. Than the past.
Okay, Amalia. So I see that we are running out of time constantly. Let's try something. Let's try to go again, but let's discuss first what this was about. First thing, remember, in the introduction, you have to say the lecture discusses, right? So the lecture discusses. Don't forget, it's not discuss, it's discusses. So the lecture discusses two changes that occurred after machines began to be used for manufacturing goods. What was the first change again? Can you summarize it as much as you can? What was the first change?
The first change was the people in the factories.
Okay. So okay, let's hear that part again.
Powered machines to produce goods, and the use of these machines brought about some significant changes. Let's go over two main changes that occurred. One change was that the center of production moved from homes to factories.
That is the first one. It says one change, center of production moved from homes to factories, right? Because they used to produce goods at home, but now they did it in factories after the machines were used. So only mention that phrase, okay? You're gonna tell me first, the professor mentions that one change was that the center of production moved from homes to factories, okay? That's it, that's everything you're gonna say. And let's see the other one.
Machines could weave cloth much more quickly and efficiently, so there wasn't any reason to keep making cloth slowly in homes when it could be made faster on factory machines. Thus, the majority of cloth production shifted from home-based businesses to factory production. Another result of the new technology is that cities started forming around factories.
Did you catch that?
I say the seas of factories.
Yes, I'm gonna play it again. Listen carefully.
Another result of the new technology is that cities started forming around factories.
Result?
The cities.
What happens with those cities?
Repeat, please. The cities.
Home-based businesses to factory production. Another result of the new technology is that cities started forming around factories.
New cities around the new factories.
Exactly. Cities started forming around factories, right? The two changes. First, that the center of production moved from homes to factories. So they weren't producing goods at homes anymore. They were doing it in factories. And second, cities were forming around the factories, right? So focus on only those two things. Later, we're going to try to implement the examples. But I want you to try again. You already have the introduction and the two subtopics. The lecture discusses two changes that occurred after machines began to be used for manufacturing goods. First, the professor explains that the center of production moved from homes to factories. In addition, the professor explains that cities started to form around factories. Okay, that's everything you need to say. Is that okay? Can you try again? You saying that?
Yep.
Please go now.
The lecture discusses the change occurred after machine began to use it for manufacturing goods. One change, the production of goods moving to homes, to factories, and the second one was create or building of new cities around the factories.
Okay, great, Gamaliel. That was great. That was perfect. As you can see, you still had 20 more seconds. Next time, during those 20 seconds, we're gonna try not the examples, okay? Or at least a bit of the examples. But it was a lot better. Don't forget to please use the template. Use transitions. You're saying, and the second one was, instead of telling me and, tell me in addition, the second change, according to the professor, was. So use those templates, right? I don't know what exactly was in the template, but try to follow it. Okay?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Great. Let us do another one. Okay.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
Birds have some of the best vision capabilities in the animal kingdom. Some bird species have vision that is 8 to 10 times greater than humans. Overall, a bird's eyes are extremely important for its survival. One aspect of birds' eyes that plays a role in helping them survive, in other words, to find food or to avoid predators, is the position of the eyes in the skull. Some birds have eyes that face forward on the skull, kind of similar to how humans' eyes are positioned. Forward-facing eyes allow a bird to clearly see and judge distances because it can focus on objects with both of its eyes and correctly perceive height, width, and depth. One type of bird with eyes positioned in the front of the skull is the hawk. Hawks eat animals like mice. Hawks have such good eyesight that they can spot a tiny mouse in a field from high up in the air. They spot the mouse and swoop down to catch it. Without such good eyesight, they would not be able to spot or catch their food. Other birds have eyes that are located on each side of the skull. This positioning of the eyes can help a bird to avoid predators. Instead of just seeing what's directly in front, they can see things that are on either side, permitting them to watch for danger in all directions. Imagine a duck wading near the edge of a lake. It needs to spend time eating grasses and insects, but it also is on constant lookout for danger from its predator, like the fox. An eye on each side of the duck's head allows it to see a fox approaching from either side. If it spots a fox, it can then fly away to safety. The placement of the eyes are critical in helping the duck avoid predators.
Now, using the examples in the lecture, explain how the position of birds' eyes is critical to their survival. You will now have 20 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay, and please, Carolina, you can start now.
The lecture discusses how the position of birds' eyes is critical to their survival. First, the professor explains the position of eyes that are further. For instance, hawks, there are animals that are good eating other animals, catching them because of this kind of eyes. Then she goes on to explain the eyes that are on each side of the skull. To illustrate this, she gives the example of some animals like other birds that pretend to be catched by other animals, as fox. So they pretend the danger for them. These are the two examples the professor gives about the position of birds' eyes that are critical for survival.
Okay, great. Good conclusion too. Very on time. So nice. You got the two subtopics. The eye is located on the front, facing forward in the skull, and the eye is located on each side. And you had the first example, the hawk. In the second one, I think that maybe you didn't catch what the animal was, right?
Yeah.
Because you said some birds. So it's fine because yeah, it is true. Some birds have that. The specific example was the duck, but it's okay. It was great the way that you had it. Now, maybe the only thing I'd say is I'm not sure if you understood how exactly the position helps them, right? When the eyes are located forward, how does this help the animal?
Because they can look higher and deeper, I think, and longer. Yeah.
Yeah, so they can.
I needed to explain more.
You were missing explaining that part. And what about when the eyes are located on each side? How does this help?
They can see more like paranomic.
Yeah. They can have this view, but how does this help?
Because if one animal is coming from this side, they can see and run.
Okay, great. So when you have biology, you always have the same things. So vocabulary or phrases you should have is one, to catch their prey, which means when they want to catch their food, right? So the hawks, for example, use the eyes that are located forward to identify the mice, which is their main source of food. So they are able to see them from a distance, from a height, and from different places. So this helps them catch their prey, right? Their food. And in the other ones, when the eyes are on the side, then that helps them avoid predators, right? Or escape from predators or hide from predators. Because they can detect, as you see, they can detect where the predators are. And they can, okay, so use those phrases.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So what do you guys think? Do you have any questions? What will we do?
I think I don't.
Is it still harder than task number 3?
I think it depends on the topic, but it's easier than yesterday now, I think.
Okay, great. Yes, that's because you're getting used to the structure. Okay, guys.
With task number 3 in the TOEFL, do we have the test there, the reading in the answer or not?
No, you just get it during those 45 seconds that you have to read, and then it goes away.
Okay.
Any other question? Guys, then please don't forget to, today we actually have 2 surveys to complete. Please, I'm sending you the first one, and as soon as you guys are done, I'll be sending the other one.
Just to let you know, tomorrow and Friday, Emiliano and I won't be able to come to the class because we're traveling and we're going at 8 p.m. So it will be difficult, but we will keep watching the YouTube videos.
Okay.
And in this moment,
right.
he's working too, and he doesn't have too much signal. That's why he didn't come. He didn't come yesterday and today.
Okay. No problem, Carolina. Thank you really much for letting me know. And yes, as long as you're watching the YouTube recordings, then you're fine.
Okay.
Okay, and please, I'm sending the other one too before you go. Okay, there you go. That's the last one. Okay, thank you very much, guys, for joining. I'll see you next class. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.